Welcome to Life Story 999, where we share powerful stories that uncover unexpected twists and bring lessons of justice and courage to life. Today, we bring you a captivating tale of a police captain who, after being unjustly profiled, becomes the catalyst for meaningful change within the force. Stay tuned, and if this story resonates with you, please hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. The sun was beginning to sink low in the sky, casting warm golden hues across the city as veteran officer Mike Reese navigated the streets in his patrol car. Next to him sat rookie officer Tom Ellis, fresh out of the academy and eager to make a difference. For Tom, this was a dream realized, a chance to serve his community and uphold the values he had been taught. But for Reese, a man whose career spanned over a decade, the work held a different meaning. Known among his peers as a strict, sometimes overbearing officer, Reese had a reputation clouded by whispers of discrimination. He often directed his suspicion toward people of color, though he was careful never to cross the line that would get him into trouble. That afternoon had been quiet, the type of shift that left him restless and almost eager for any small provocation. As they drove down Main Street, Reese's gaze narrowed, catching sight of a sleek black sedan pulling out of a nearby parking lot. Behind the wheel sat a well-dressed black man, appearing to be in his late 40s, exuding an air of confidence and poise. Reese's attention sharpened instantly, a hint of a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Pull him over," Reese muttered under his breath, the command laced with a tone that made it clear there would be no discussion. Tom looked at his partner, a bit thrown off by the sudden directive. The man had done nothing suspicious, and the vehicle moved smoothly, observing all traffic rules. It was just another car on an ordinary day. What's the reason, Officer Reese?" Tom asked, his voice uncertain, a little hesitant. He wasn't sure why they needed to pull the car over. There was no clear reason he could see. Reese shot Tom a look that silenced any further questioning. "Trust me, kid. Just do it. You'll learn," he said curtly, his tone carrying the weight of authority that Tom dared not challenge. Reluctantly, Tom flipped on the patrol car's siren, and the flashing lights illuminated the street, casting a warning to the driver in front. The black sedan slowed, signaling as it pulled over to the curb. Inside, the driver, Lucas Carter, a successful businessman who had spent a long day at work, felt a familiar sense of unease creep over him. He had been pulled over enough times in his life to recognize this wasn't a routine stop. Still, he kept his composure, turning off the engine and resting his hands on the steering wheel in plain sight, a practiced action born of experience. Meanwhile, Reese exited the patrol car, his movements confident and assertive, with Tom trailing slightly behind. Reese's hand hovered near his holstered gun as he approached, projecting an air of control and authority that bordered on intimidation. As Reese reached the driver's window, Lucas rolled it down, greeting the officer with a calm, respectful nod. "Good afternoon, officer," Lucas said in a polite tone, meeting Reese's gaze directly. "Is there a problem?" Instead of answering, Reese cut straight to the point. "License and registration," he demanded, his tone clipped and unyielding, laced with a hint of disdain that he didn't bother to hide. Lucas calmly reached into his glove compartment, retrieving his documents and handing them over without a word. As Reese looked over the paperwork, Tom observed from behind, noting the name printed clearly, Lucas Carter. Something about the name felt vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Reese, however, appeared unfazed, his smirk growing slightly. "You from around here, Carter?" Reese asked, his words tinged with a coldness that carried more than a simple question. Lucas met Reese's stare evenly. "Yes, officer. I live nearby," he replied, his tone steady and respectful. Reese handed the documents back, leaning in slightly. "Your tail light's out. Better get that fixed before you end up causing an accident." Tom, listening closely, frowned. He hadn't noticed any issue with the tail light when they pulled the car over. "Of course, officer. Thank you for letting me know," Lucas replied, maintaining his calm demeanor. He understood this wasn't about a tail light. It was about power and a man in uniform using that power to intimidate. As Reese lingered, his posture hostile and challenging, Tom felt a knot form in his stomach. The rookie officer had come into this job with high ideals, ready to make a difference, but what he was witnessing now clashed deeply with those values. He struggled with the realization that, sometimes, the people meant to protect others might not uphold the integrity he once thought they did. Lucas Carter sat in his car, his hands resting steadily on the wheel, exuding a calm, steady composure. He had turned off the engine as soon as he saw the flashing lights, aware of the routine yet feeling the familiar tension that came with these situations. His gaze shifted slightly as Officer Mike Reese approached his window, his demeanor projecting a calculated authority that felt more oppressive than professional. Reese's hand hovered near his holstered weapon, a subtle yet unmistakable display of control that was hard for Lucas to ignore. "Is there a problem, officer?" Lucas asked, his tone respectful yet direct. His question was met not with an explanation but with a curt, almost dismissive response. "License and registration," Reese demanded, ignoring the question entirely. His voice was clipped, and the slight edge to it revealed an underlying hostility that didn't sit well with Lucas. Nevertheless, Lucas nodded, reaching into his glove compartment with deliberate, visible movements before handing over his documents. He was careful not to make any sudden moves, aware of the caution he needed to exercise in situations like these. Meanwhile, Tom Ellis, the young rookie officer, observed the exchange from a short distance behind Reese. Having recently joined the force, Ellis was still adjusting to life on the streets, and this encounter left him feeling more uneasy than any training exercise had prepared him for. He watched Reese closely, sensing that something was off in his partner's demeanor. The officer's body language, his tone, and the unnecessary aggression all hinted at something more than routine protocol. As Reese scanned Lucas's documents, he threw a quick, disapproving glance at Ellis before turning back to Lucas. "Without missing a beat," he said, "your tail lights out. That's a safety hazard, you know." The accusation was delivered matter-of-factly, but to Ellis's surprise, there was no evidence of a broken tail light when they first pulled the car over. He could feel his stomach tighten as he realized the discrepancy, and he instinctively wanted to speak up, but a warning glance from Reese kept him silent. Lucas, however, didn't flinch. He met Reese's gaze, acknowledging the accusation with a calm nod. "Thank you for informing me, officer," he said simply, maintaining his composed demeanor. Reese, seemingly unsatisfied with the response, leaned in closer, his expression hardening as he scanned Lucas's face for any hint of defiance. "You sure you're not hiding anything, Carter?" Reese pressed, his tone thick with insinuation. The question lingered, a clear attempt to provoke Lucas, but Lucas kept his gaze steady and calm, showing no reaction to the officer's aggressive line of questioning. Ellis's discomfort deepened as he watched the scene unfold. Reese's approach was clearly outside the bounds of reasonable suspicion, and Ellis felt an internal conflict brewing. He had entered this line of work with the belief that he would be serving his community, upholding justice. But here, watching Reese press Lucas without cause, he began to question the reality of his role and whether his ideals had a place on the force. As Reese continued his interrogation, the tension grew palpable. Lucas's silent resilience seemed to irritate Reese, who was accustomed to seeing intimidation tactics produce a different response. But Lucas, with years of experience in facing prejudice, understood what this was really about and resolved to keep his composure. He knew that this encounter, like many before, was rooted in something far beyond a minor traffic violation. As Officer Reese's frustration mounted, he barked an order to his partner: "Search the car." Ellis froze, his heart pounding as he weighed the command. He knew they had no probable cause to conduct a search, and every instinct he had, both from his training and his own sense of right and wrong, told him this wasn't how policing should be. But the sharp authority in Reese's voice and the implications of defying his superior made Ellis hesitate, torn between his duty to follow orders and his inner sense of justice. Reluctantly, Ellis moved to the passenger side, trying to quell the sinking feeling in his gut. He knew this was wrong. The man seated calmly behind the wheel had done nothing to warrant this search, and Ellis was painfully aware of the injustice he was about to participate in. As he began to search the glove compartment and other compartments, he felt each movement cut against his values. He could see Lucas watching him in the rearview mirror, his gaze steady, unyielding, and calm. Lucas remained composed, hands still on the wheel, his expression unshaken. He understood that this was more than a routine traffic stop. It was a display of power, a calculated act meant to assert dominance rather than uphold the law. Yet Lucas held back from revealing his true identity. As a newly appointed police captain in this very precinct, he knew that his actions here mattered, not only for his personal dignity but for the principles he had sworn to protect within the force. This wasn't the time to disclose who he was. Instead, it was a test of patience and restraint, knowing the importance of timing in a situation as charged as this. As Ellis continued the search, the weight of his internal conflict grew heavier. He had joined the police force with the intention of protecting citizens and upholding the law, yet here he was, feeling like a participant in an act that undermined those very ideals. He could feel Reese's eyes on him, monitoring his every move, and the pressure intensified. The silence stretched, charged with tension, as Lucas sat, quietly enduring the violation of his privacy. He knew that Reese's actions were the result of unchecked authority, a misuse of power he had seen all too often. But this time, he was determined to address it, understanding that, as an officer with rank, he held the responsibility to set things right, starting with this encounter. As Ellis continued his reluctant search of the car, Officer Reese stepped in closer to Lucas, his sneer unmistakable. He leaned near the open window, looking Lucas up and down with a mixture of disdain and smug satisfaction. "People like you always think you're better than you are," Reese muttered, the insult hanging in the air, thick with prejudice. Lucas, however, remained unshaken. He met Reese's gaze with calm, steady eyes that held neither fear nor anger, just a silent confidence that unnerved Reese more than he cared to admit. "I'd watch my words if I were you," Lucas said softly, his voice steady but carrying a weight of authority that was hard to ignore. But instead of backing down, Reese's face contorted with frustration, his anger only deepening. He wasn't accustomed to anyone, especially someone he viewed with such disdain, speaking to him this way. His hand drifted closer to his holstered weapon, a subtle but unmistakable threat that escalated the tension. Ellis, observing from the side, felt his own pulse quicken, the atmosphere thickening with each passing second. Then, as calmly as ever, Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a badge. Holding it up, he let the glint of the gold shield catch the afternoon light, the words, "Police Captain," clearly visible on its surface. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Ellis's eyes widened in shock, while Reese's face paled, his expression flickering from disbelief to a dawning realization of the gravity of his mistake. Reese blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. He opened his mouth to speak, but found no words to fill the silence that now felt louder than any accusation. The weight of what he had done began to sink in, pulling over, harassing, and attempting to intimidate a superior officer. Yet, instead of backing down or apologizing, Reese's pride and prejudice held him in its grip, fueling a last, desperate act of defiance. His hand moved, gripping the handle of his gun, his body tense, ready to draw. Lucas didn't flinch, his gaze locked onto Reese's in a silent, powerful command to stop. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a move. His presence alone communicated an unyielding authority. The standoff held, each man caught in a silent battle of wills, but Lucas's calm, quiet confidence radiated control over the entire scene. Finally, breaking the silence, Lucas spoke, his voice low and firm, carrying the weight of his rank. "Put the gun down, Officer Reese. This is your last chance." His tone left no room for argument, a command that even Reese, in his stubbornness, couldn't ignore. At that moment, Ellis, gathering his courage, stepped forward, positioning himself between Reese and Lucas. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, his face a mixture of fear and determination. "Officer Reese, don't do this," Ellis pleaded. "It's over. Stand down." For the first time, Reese hesitated, his hand still on his weapon but his confidence beginning to waver. The gravity of his actions was finally breaking through his stubborn pride, the reality settling in as he looked into the unwavering eyes of his new commanding officer. Slowly, Reese released his grip on his gun, his hand falling to his side, his posture deflated. Lucas remained silent as he got out of the car, standing tall before the two officers. His authority needed no further declaration. Reese's face was pale, his earlier bravado gone, replaced by a profound sense of regret as he finally understood the magnitude of his actions. In the tense silence that followed, just as it seemed that Officer Reese's anger might push the situation past the point of no return, Ellis found the courage to intervene. Stepping between Reese and Lucas, he raised his hands, a gesture meant to de-escalate the volatile situation unfolding before him. Ellis's heart raced, but his voice was steady as he addressed Reese directly. "Officer Reese, please don't do this. It's over. You need to stop," he pleaded, his tone both firm and imploring. Reese's gaze shifted from Ellis back to Lucas, his grip still tight on the handle of his gun. Yet Ellis's words seemed to reach him, cutting through the fog of anger and pride that had driven him this far. He realized, albeit grudgingly, the irreversible mistake he had made. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Reese's hand loosened, his fingers releasing the weapon. He lowered his arm, his face shifting from anger to a dawning recognition of the gravity of his actions. As the tension finally eased, Lucas quietly opened his car door and stepped out, standing tall before both officers. He looked directly at Ellis, his expression unreadable yet commanding. Addressing the young officer, Lucas spoke with a calm authority. "Officer Ellis, you showed courage today. You did the right thing," he said, his words carrying a weight that Ellis felt profoundly. Despite the turmoil of the encounter, Ellis felt a surge of relief, recognizing that his actions had made a difference. Lucas then turned to Reese, his tone taking on a steely edge. "Officer Reese, hand over your weapon and badge," Lucas ordered, his voice firm and unyielding. Reese's face drained of color, his earlier bravado completely dissolved. He stared at Lucas, a mix of shock and disbelief clouding his features, but he knew there was no room for argument. Reluctantly, Reese removed his gun and badge, handing them to Lucas, each motion heavy with the awareness that his authority had been stripped away by his own actions. The realization of his reckless behavior, once veiled by arrogance, now sat heavily on him as he handed over the symbols of his position. As Lucas took possession of Reese's weapon and badge, a sense of justice and accountability settled over the scene. This moment marked more than just a disciplinary action. It was the beginning of a long-overdue reckoning within the department, a sign that abuse of power would no longer go unchecked. Lucas's decisive action made it clear that integrity and accountability were not just ideals, but standards that would be upheld, starting with this very encounter. In the weeks following the incident, the department launched a thorough internal investigation into Officer Reese's conduct. Thanks to Ellis's detailed testimony and supporting evidence, a disturbing pattern of Reese's behavior began to emerge. Records revealed a long history of racial profiling and questionable conduct, incidents that had previously gone unchallenged due to his carefully concealed tactics and the absence of formal complaints. Now, however, with Ellis's courageous stand and Captain Lucas's support, Reese's actions were finally brought to light. Captain Lucas took his new role as an opportunity to implement long-needed changes within the department. He introduced mandatory bias training for all officers, emphasizing the importance of impartiality and respect in every interaction. Additionally, Lucas pushed for greater transparency, requiring that officers document and report all traffic stops, searches, and arrests to prevent similar abuses of power. His commitment to these reforms sent a clear message that such misconduct would not be tolerated, and he worked tirelessly to repair the trust between the community and the police force. Ellis, meanwhile, found himself regarded as a symbol of integrity within the department. His role in exposing Reese's misconduct and his courage in stepping forward during a difficult moment had not gone unnoticed. Colleagues respected his resolve, and his actions inspired others within the force to prioritize their duty to uphold justice. The experience marked a turning point in Ellis's career, solidifying his commitment to his role as a protector of the community and reinforcing his belief in integrity as the foundation of law enforcement. Reese, on the other hand, faced legal consequences for his actions. Charges were filed for unlawful conduct, racial profiling, and abuse of authority, culminating in his dismissal and subsequent trial. His fall from authority served as a stark reminder to all officers of the repercussions of unchecked power. The case gained media attention, sparking discussions around police accountability and reinforcing the need for reform within law enforcement. Under Lucas's leadership, the department gradually began to regain the community's trust, as citizens saw genuine efforts toward change. The incident and its consequences resonated deeply within the force, reinforcing the idea that accountability was paramount and that justice extended beyond the community to those wearing the badge. In the end, the encounter between Reese, Ellis, and Lucas became more than an isolated incident. It became a pivotal moment that reshaped the department's values and commitment to fair policing. It stood as a reminder that courage and integrity, even in the face of adversity, can drive positive change and uphold the principles of justice. Thank you for joining us on Life Story 999. This story reminds us of the importance of integrity, the courage to stand against injustice, and the role each of us plays in fostering accountability. The transformation within this police force serves as a powerful example of what can happen when we confront prejudice with truth. If this story inspired you, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to stay connected with more stories that promote change and justice.